Hello, I wanted to do another little video tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about masking, autistic masking, otherwise known as, well, it's got several different labels that people give to it. Camouflaging was when I first came across it, but masking I think is a better term. It's a really big part. I'm starting to think that it might be almost the biggest part actually of the kind of, especially the adult autistic experience. So I thought just a brief video explaining what the term means, so that if you come across it on Twitter or online anywhere, you've got an understanding of what it's all about. So masking then is, well, it's exactly how it sounds. It's the process by which an autistic person who will inherently and naturally not present generally as a neurotypical person, that they will present differently to that. They will be atypical. They will, their body language, their use of language, the way they show their emotions, the way that they show sympathy, the way that they show this, that, and everything, is naturally going to be different. It's naturally going to be different to what a neurotypical person would expect. Okay, so as an autistic person, for example, if I were to just completely be myself, then it is very likely that in any given social situation, my behaviour will be seen as being a little bit peculiar, or strange, or possibly even unhelpful, or unwanted, or bad. You know, if people want to make it an evaluative thing and a judgmental thing. And that's because of it's primarily because of the way that our brains work. Our brains work in a very different way to neurotypicals. We don't really know exactly how all of this works, but because it's the brain, and I mean, we don't really know how the brain works generally, but it certainly seems to be something to do with the architecture of the brain, the way the brain's actually wired. It seems to be quite different in the brain of an autistic person. And as you can probably imagine, with something as complex as a brain, if you wire it differently, then different things are going to happen. You know, it's going to be a bit of a, it's going to cause quite a considerable amount of difference. You know, like if I went downstairs now and got my gaming PC and just opened the side up and just started, fiddling around with the wires and connected them differently, in a way to make sure that it would still work, I can pretty much guarantee that when I turned it on, it would be a very different machine, and probably not necessarily in a good way. So that's what we've got in our brains. We've got different wiring systems. Everything's set up slightly differently. And that means that our behaviours, therefore, are going to be different. I mean, stands to reason. Masking is what we do to try to prevent that. Because we will have learned from long experience, probably at quite a young age. I know that I was very young, I think, when looking back, I started to realise this. That these behaviours are not wanted. They are not welcome at all in the neurotypical world. Okay? It sounds kind of over the top and over dramatic, but believe me, trust me on this, if you're neurotypical, the kind of stereotypical autistic behaviours, neurodiverse behaviours, they really are not seen as okay. And I'm not talking about, I don't know, attacking people or biting folk or going completely berserk and screeching and things like that. Although, to be fair, all of those things can happen if we enter meltdown because people won't blooming leave us alone. I'm just talking about little things like I don't know, like not responding the way you'd expect someone to respond. Struggling to show empathy. You might feel it, but struggling to show it. That can go down like a lead balloon, that can, believe me. Stimming, the kind of repetitive movements that we like to do. I mean, I've been sitting here every video that I've done, and I've been, if you remember, I've been taking the head and the hair and things off of various Lego men for the whole time, like some kind of crazed torturer. And I've got, quite a hand gesture going on as well, like a magician. But these behaviours are not acceptable in the world in general. I mean, safe spaces like schools, etc. They like to think that these behaviours are acceptable and that nothing bad will happen to people that show these behaviours. But you tell that to the kids, who will then, bully other children who show these autistic tendencies. Look, autistic behaviour, the behaviour that we would naturally show, is not really allowed. Okay? And I think the sooner the world kind of comes to terms with that and realizes that that is the case, and that is how we feel as autistic people. We feel like our behaviour is unwanted. That needs to happen for any real change to occur, I think. And because of this, we mask. We pretend. We pretend to be neurotypical because it's the only thing we can do. And that's only if we're able to. Not everyone can. Not every autistic person is able to mask. If you've got comorbid conditions, if you have learning disabilities as well, then being able to mask is probably not going to be in any way possible. It'll probably be one of the last things you'd want to think about doing. But those of us that can, we pretty typically do. And for those of us that were diagnosed as adults, that probably means we were really good at it at school. Okay, and we've been good at it for probably our entire lives. So, what does it involve? Well, it's very hard to say. It's like acting, I think. It is very much like acting. I'm not sure whether I'm doing it now. It's an interesting one, this, with a video, because I'm just talking to myself, basically. And I think one of the reasons why I don't mind doing this is because I'm actually quite happy to talk to myself, which is either just because I'm a peculiar, eccentric fellow, or maybe it's something to do with autism. Like I don't feel that kind of weird social stigma of talking to yourself. So I'm not sure that I am masking now, actually. Not really. It's an interesting one. I have to think about that more. But generally speaking, on an everyday basis, I will be masking probably 60% of the time, 70% of the time. Not counting sleep, obviously. I don't mask in my sleep, I guess I don't think I do. That'd be weird. But before I was diagnosed back in 2017, I think it's fair to say I was probably masking pretty much all of the time. And of course I didn't know I was doing it. You don't know you're doing it. You do it because it's a survival mechanism. Okay, and I think I learned it at a very young age. I probably learned it at primary school, I would have thought, without realising that I was learning to do it. It's quite impressive, really. We learn how to mask without being taught. And I think you copy your peers. You study them intently. Your friends, your family, people on the telly, very frequently. And you copy their mannerisms. You do what they do. You laugh like they laugh. You tell jokes like they tell jokes. You respond emotionally like they respond emotionally. And you build a kind of repertoire, if you like, of behaviours that you've seen. They're tried and tested. You've seen someone use them and it's worked. So you add them to your kind of mental folder of acceptable behaviours. Because God forbid anyone would ever see you do an autistic thing. Because then you'll be a target of mockery and abuse. So all through school, I will have done this. I mean, I had friends. I had plenty of friends at school. I mean, not vast amounts, but certainly some very good, close friends. Sadly, a lot of who I'm no longer in touch with, because that's one thing about autistic people. We are crap at keeping in touch with people. So, if you're watching, Christian and Craig, Gavin, even Lewis, they were good times. We had fun, and if you want to, drop me a line, then please do. But it was masking. I would be copying these people, not in a bad way, and not because I wanted to appear better than I was. I just had to survive. I had to get through that experience of being at school and all the rest of it, and without looking too weird. I had a pathological fear as a child of looking weird. That's faded as I've got older. I don't really care so much now, hence the look. But as a kid, I really was deeply frightened of looking strange, and I think that's because deep down I knew that I was a bit weird, a bit different. So I did everything that I possibly could to avoid that being really obvious. And I moved schools a lot too. I must have moved schools 3 or 4 times, primary and secondary, including one time between year 9 and year 10. I mean, imagine that, just before you start your GCSEs. I left a fairly normal secondary school in Leicestershire, mixed gender, normal kind of intake, to a relatively posh grammar school, boys' grammar school in Lincolnshire. That was fun. So, I had the ample opportunities to practice this masking, and believe me, being thrown into an environment, without girls, which traditionally I do think I tend to get on a little bit better with girls than I do women than men. It was quite the experience, and I think that really forces your hand. You become good at masking, very good at masking in those situations, because you really haven't got any other choice. You've got to try to survive, and it continues throughout. So there we are. There's lots of my life history there that you didn't necessarily need to know, but hey ho. Just a bit then about what it consists of. So I've said that it involves copying people. And it's more like mimicry. It's really more like mimicry, I think. It's not entirely conscious, although it can be. It can be a little at times. I've certainly noticed that I'm doing it in the past, even before I was diagnosed. If I really think about it, I look back and think, oh, this is a silly one, but how would Jim Halpert react to this? Because, Jim Halpert in The Office, the American Office, is obviously, for the most part, a fairly, decent person. And you tend to latch on to those people that seem to be nice, on telly or in reality, to mimic, because you want to be nice yourself. You want to come across as nice yourself, of course you do. So yeah, what would Jim Halpert do? And maybe I should react like he would. And of course, the sad thing is, I thought everybody did this. I thought this was absolutely normal. This was what everyone did. And it turns out, oh no, it is not. It's a very different thing to, I think, what most neurotypicals. Although, don't get me wrong, this always happens, I think. There probably are elements of this that neurotypical people do. Want to be like their heroes on TV, or want to act like their cool friends. Don't misunderstand this. It's different to that. Okay, believe me, it's very different to that. It's more, far more intense, far more high stakes, far less conscious as well, I think. And the problem with this masking is, and I've got to get to this before I get to the end of the video, because I don't want this to be too long a video, because you'll get bored. But the problem with this masking is, as you can probably imagine, it's exhausting. It's completely exhausting. You are using way more of your resources than you would be when you're not masking, because you're maintaining a facade. You're maintaining something unnatural almost, and that comes with a high energy cost. So the sad reality is that the extended sessions, extended times of masking for extended periods, can become really quite problematic. And that's when you get to the real issues, okay? Because that will eventually lead to exhaustion and possibly depression. It could lead to burnout, which I'll talk about another day when I can cope with it, because it's not a very happy subject. And ultimately, it can lead to suicide. And I think, that this is why this is so important to get this message out. And that's one of the reasons why I'm spending so much of my time at the moment when I'm not working or sleeping or doing normal person things, doing these videos and tweeting this stuff and writing this book that I'm working on, because I want the world needs to know that there's a problem here. There is a problem here, and we need to work on it and sort it out. It's not necessarily the biggest problem facing us right now. Don't get me wrong. There are even bigger things out there that are causing terrible trouble. But this has got to be up there. Okay, the experience of autistic people. There's a lot of us, and some of us suffer terribly. I'm not going to count myself in that. Luckily I get by relatively well, I think. But some are suffering dreadfully. And we need to do something about that. So that's why I will continue to do these videos, okay, until it's like I'm holding the world to ransom. Until something changes, I will do a video every day on the hour, okay? So get used to that. Okay, right, I'll see you another time. Bye-bye.